With the NBA trade deadline less than a day away, the Toronto Raptors have had a bunch of reports come out over the last 24 hours, including the Raptors being insistent on acquiring the Brooklyn Nets center Nick Claxton. The Raptors and the Spurs have had a bunch of talks regarding a Jakob Poeltl and Gary Trent Jr. trade, where the Raptors will be adding draft capital to the package. OG Anunoby's situation has sort of been laid out by The Athletic, and a bunch of players have been linked to the Raptors in sort of minor reports. So lots of stuff to break down. Without further ado, let's jump to the first topic of discussion, and it's about the Raptors being insistent on acquiring Nick Claxton. And just before we do, actually, I haven't plugged in a while, but if you want to keep up to date and you've been watching the videos lately regarding the Toronto Raptors trade deadline coverage and Raptors coverage in general, definitely hit that subscribe button. It means the world to us. We're making a little push now for 28K at this point, so definitely hit that subscribe button. It helps us out big time. But Nick Claxton has been a name the Raptors have been looking at over the past recent weeks. Lots of reports have come out, and it's not just stemming for this year's trade deadline, as last trade deadline, the Raptors were also intrigued about acquiring Nick Claxton as well. The season prior, they were interested in flipping Chris Boucher for Nick Claxton, to much dismay of Raptors fans. So Masai Ujiri has had his eyes directly on Nick Claxton for recent years, but the guy has kind of had a breakout season this year. In the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, putting up pretty remarkable stats for a center. 13 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2.6 blocks a night, 73% from the field, and long, wiry, young, fits the Toronto Raptors sort of mold and fills the position of need for this Raptors team. So makes sense why the Raptors were interested, are especially interested in him ahead of this year's trade deadline. And a report has come out from Ian Begley, the guy that's locked in insider for all of the New York sports teams, basically saying that one thing to note with the Nets here is they've obviously talked to Toronto a decent amount about trying to get another deal done ahead of this year's trade deadline. And I am told that members of the Raptors have been insistent on getting Nick Claxton back in any significant trade with the Nets. So that is pretty interesting because Claxton obviously has a lot of trade value. Nets fans have been coming in our comment section roasting me for even thinking about trying to acquire Nick Claxton. But in any substantial deal, I've said Claxton's only, with the exception of Cam Thomas, who has had some big games recently, but, recency bias might make us look away from the fact he's only averaging 8 points per game this season. But again, maybe with an extended role, he'll be able to be more of a scoring punch. But, Claxton, Cam Thomas are really the only two players that really catch your eye if you're a Toronto Raptors fan, with obviously the exception of Kevin Durant, a few of the veterans that they have. But, in terms of young guys that fit that Scottie Barnes timeline, those are the two players that we'd like to get back. Now, it's been widely reported that Fred VanVleet could be a player that Kevin Durant is interested, a guy that they want to have replace Kyrie Irving. There's talks that the Nets were hoping for a Dinwiddie sort of a switch following the deal for Kyrie. But obviously, OG Anunoby's been named across every single team in the NBA. There's been reports saying the Nets are interested, then not interested, saying the price is too high, but then, other teams will be willing to offer 3 first-round picks. So conflicting reports on that front. But the big name that caught a lot of eyes early this week is Pascal Siakam, and had me especially worried when we talked about Ben Simmons and Siakam swaps that people were chatting about, saying discussions have been made on that front. Well, The Athletic also sort of clarified the Pascal Siakam situation. Basically saying from Sam Amick, Pascal Siakam's preference is to continue his career in Toronto. A source with knowledge on the situation tells Sam Amick. Bearing a Godfather offer coming to Masai Ujiri for Pascal Siakam, I don't see a deal going down there. So, while, sure, Nick Claxton's got some trade value, he's not a multi-time All-Star, he's not an NBA champion, he's not an All-NBA guy. Actually, if Pascal's an multi-time All-Star, multi-time All-NBA player, right? And Siakam's having the best season of his career. There's going to have to be a lot come back if the Raptors would be willing to think about trading him away. So if the Nets are interested and very intrigued about a Pascal Siakam deal, it's going to have to be Claxton. It's going to have to be Cam Thomas. It's going to have to be a bunch of picks. It's going to have to probably be Ben Simmons to match salary and all that sort of stuff. But, it would have to be a godfather offer. So I'm done stressing about that. If a deal does go down, it'll catch me by surprise regarding Pascal Siakam, but we'll deal with that when we come to it. But lots of rumors there. Still talk between the Toronto Raptors and Brooklyn Nets. But the next thing we're taking a look at is Trent Jr. and Jakob Poeltl trade discussions happening. Now, this was a big topic of discussion a few weeks ago when a lot of people were a bit shook, especially where the Raptors were on a bit of a downward trajectory in terms of being a win-now team, a team that can really make a push, make a win-now move. And obviously, Jakob Poeltl will be a guy that sort of fits that win-now timeline. But both Gary Trent Jr. and Jakob Poeltl are free agents this offseason, and a lot of reports have tied Masai Ujiri to trying to reacquire their former center that they dealt away in the DeMar DeRozan package and bringing him back home. And these rumors have picked up once again with one day ahead of this year's trade deadline, and we have more details in terms of what a package will look like. As reports have basically come out saying that further complicating matters when trying to assess Toronto's intentions, there were some fresh rumbles this week that they had explored packaging Trent Jr. as well as some level of draft compensation to San Antonio for Jakob Poeltl. This is a move you would make if you're trying to move up the Eastern Conference ladder, not down. The Raptors, for the record, don't seem to mind the confusion that they're generating. And, maybe Masai Ujiri, given the reputation he's gained as a swindler across the NBA, finessing teams for packages, given the Raptors trying to maintain their leverage as a team that's sort of been losing, sort of on that shred mill status right now this season, Masai Ujiri's trying to play some 4D chess with other NBA teams in order to not have them know what we're trying to do. And, if we're trying to be buyers, if we're trying to be sellers, but there has been a lot of reporting regarding this interest that they have in Jakob Poeltl, and for good reason. I mean, Jakob Poeltl is a solid player, right? I guess this is Trent stats, what we'd be sending out. 19 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 37% from the three-point line, can get his own shot, is solid on the defensive end, 1.6 steals a night. But so that's a big, if you're throwing that name around, Gary Trent Jr. for a guy like Jakob Poeltl, makes sense given Poeltl's ability as a center, 12 points, 9 rebounds, solid defender, 62% from the field, right? Block a night, but very solid positional defender. Poeltl's a great player, but Gary Trent Jr., given the Toronto Raptors have such a lack of shooting on their team at this point, we're trying to build around a Scotty Barnes. Doesn't make sense to bring in a big man. Sure, we do need a center and stuff, but that isn't going to be crazy blocking shots. Doesn't have that insane potential as a Nick Claxton, right? You know what you're getting from Jakob Poeltl, and it's not going to be an improvement from the field. He's also a bad free throw shooter, like Nick Claxton as well. It should be known Nick Claxton's not a great free throw shooter, and to give up a guy that's really I don't want to say most consistent, but probably our best shooter on the Toronto Raptors. Make an argument between him and Fred or our spot-up guys, but trade away Gary Trent Jr. for a yak that, again, sure, positionally fits more of a need, but lack of shooting and stuff, it's a bit confusing. And I don't know, a lot of people just want to keep Gary Trent Jr., right? He's been through it this season, and he's had a very professional outlook with everything that's gone on with being the sixth man for the Raptors, bouncing back from it, knocking down shots, whatever role's been asked of him, he's been able to do it. So I don't know. I'm not fully bought in, and the fact that we'd be attaching draft capital to it as well makes me skeptical, makes me a bit confused. And as Mark Stein sort of put it, the Raptors are just confusing a lot of teams right now. And given the prior reporting, Masai Ujiri's, I'm hoping, just playing some 4D chess with a potential deal there. And if we're really desperate to acquire Jakob Poeltl this offseason, sign him as a free agent. Give him a contract that he could be interested in. That's something that I'd be more intrigued with. And given the fact he's an unrestricted free agent, given the fact that we traded him prior, right, we dealt him away. Sure, his friend Pascal Siakam is still here, the Yak and Skills duo, but maybe Yak still feels a sort of way about the Raptors trading him, and we bring him back and he just leaves in free agency. That's sort of a recipe for disaster, and it doesn't seem like Trent Jr. is going to command that horrible of a contract this offseason, so I'd be cool with just bringing Trent back and figuring it out from there. And if you want Jakob Poeltl, make a huge push for it in the offseason. But let me know what you guys think on that front. I'm a little bit confused about stuff that's happening there. And if you guys feel like you got it figured out and you want to have some put your money where your mouth is. Definitely check out the Coolbet Sportsbook, as you can bet on everything regarding the NBA, Toronto Raptors, or any sport really in general using the Coolbet Sportsbook. And they got a lot of interesting futures ahead, about season conference standings. You can bet on every single game, the parlays for any given night. And if you have your sort of eye set on a specific team that could make a move to leap them into the standings, you can bet on them now using the link down below, signing up for Coolbet, and make your predictions before they actually acquire the guys you're interested in. But shout out to Coolbet for supporting the podcast. The best sportsbook if you're interested in all that sort of stuff. But we have some more news to sort of cover, and the next thing we're taking a look at is OG wanting a bigger role with the Raptors or elsewhere. And this is interesting because we've heard a lot of talk about OG Anunoby wanting out, wanting a bigger role, lots of discussions on that front. And even those comments have been cryptic at times, even Nick Nurse's comments regarding OG wanting more of an opportunity, more of a role, right, have been discussed in the past. OG's never really struck me as a guy that's really mad about being in Toronto, that's asking his way out, that feels disrespected in any regard. But by the amount of smoke with all the reports that have come out, it does seem like OG definitely wants a bigger role. But we got some more insight from the Athletic here today. Basically, this is the little excerpt. There's been a lot of chatter about him being unhappy dating back to last summer. And a source with knowledge on the situation said he would prefer a bigger role, whether it's within Toronto or elsewhere. The Raptors' offensive style under longtime coach Nick Nurse, it seems to remain an issue. As it stands, Anunoby is fourth on these Raptors in terms of attempts, behind Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., and second-year forward Scotty Barnes, just behind him at 13.3 attempts a night. The Raptors, who are the 11th in offensive rating, are just 24th in the league in assists per game. And in the eyes of some suitors, Anunoby profiles like the kind of young two-way talent that could keep rising in an environment where he's allowed to shine more often. So I think this is a legitimate smoke. I think this is something that is genuine. OG does want more of a role. He doesn't like the sort of ISO heavy offense that we can sort of fall into as a Raptors team, and it definitely makes sense, right? I'm not bashing him or by any means for wanting a bigger role. I mean, you look at a guy like Jeremy Grant, who was gifted more of an opportunity with the Detroit Pistons, and now on his new team, the Portland Trailblazers, he's being offered a max extension. So OG probably feels like, hey, rather than being a $20 to $25 million per year guy with a bigger role and a new opportunity, even though I like it here, Toronto, the fans, the organization, all that sort of stuff, if I had that opportunity to really shine a little bit more, I could go from a 20 to 25 million guy to maybe a 30 plus, a $35 million guy, similar to Jeremy Grant in a new situation. So I can't blame him on that front. It is unfortunate, but it's going to be interesting to see how the Raptors sort of navigate that situation, given OG's value on the open market right now. His trade value has really never been higher, and him potentially not necessarily wanting out, but wanting a bigger role. But the final thing we're discussing in this video is Raptors have interest in 2 Western Conference guards and 1 Eastern Conference guard. I forgot I didn't forget. I didn't have the chance to tack it on before I got to record this video, but the Raptors have been linked to a couple of guys. As it's reports that Eric Gordon has drawn exploratory interest from the Celtics, the Raptors, and the Heat, according to Miko Hoops. So another confusing guy for the Raptors to go after. I know a guy that can score, can knock down the three, would help the Toronto Raptors short term, right? He's an older dude, so I don't know if... And the Rockets have notoriously had a high asking price for him, but that's Eric Gordon. And then also reports have come out that the Denver Nuggets have removed Bones Highland from the rotation the days leading to Thursday's trade deadline, and that's expected to be a precursor to trading Highland. The Minnesota Timberwolves, New Orleans Pelicans, and Toronto Raptors have all shown some interest in trading the second-year guard. The Nuggets believe that they can get a first-round pick in exchange for Highland. So, Bones is definitely an intriguing player. I mean, you look at Bones' stats, he's a pretty interesting dude. These are Eric Gordon's stats. I'll take a look at Bones first. If I get the right player up, I took a look at Jakob's. There we go. Pressing the wrong buttons, and still is not popping up. But a guy that's in the low teens, right? He's in a second-year player. He's a guy that's like a microwave. He can get hot in a hurry. Solid three-point shooter. Is a smaller guard, but can dribble, can shoot, and has a lot of potential. So Bones Highland be an interesting pickup. Could definitely play the backup point guard for our squad. And as I said, Eric Gordon's stats, right? 13 points per game, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 34% from behind the three-point line. Not a guy I'd give a lot up to acquire, but if we do go in that win now direction, along with some other moves, wouldn't mind bringing Eric Gordon into the franchise. But report also came out that the Raptors have some interest in Matisse Thybulle, so another guy this dude hasn't had a great year at all, but the Raptors have had interest in the past, play solid on-ball defense, his potential as a shooter, but offensively is very limited. But lots of stuff happening over the Toronto Raptors in recent weeks, so definitely hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with everything surrounding this team. But you guys are the best for making this far. Subscribe to the channel. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.